Good morning, my name is Gretchen Groves, and today we'll be talking about GDP, or Gross Domestic Product, standard of living, and productivity. Our objectives for today are to define and understand gross domestic product, standard of living, and productivity. As well, we want to understand the equation as well as the three approaches to determining gross domestic product. And finally, hopefully you'll learn some helpful tips and advice for being more productive in your future. First, gross domestic product. Investopedia.com defines gross domestic product as the monetary value of all finished goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time period. This is also a broad measurement of the nation's overall economic activity and can be calculated on an annual or a quarterly basis. GDP can be determined from this following formula. GDP equals C plus G plus I plus NX. It sounds confusing, but it's actually not that confusing at all. C here stands for the consumer's spending in the nation's economy. G is the sum of all the government spending. I stands for all of the country's investment, or the sum of the country's investment. And then the NX we have here stands for the total number of net exports. You can find this from taking the total imports and subtracting it from the total exports. Some facts about gross domestic product. It's commonly used as an indicator of economic health of the country and the standard of living. Gross domestic product is measured as percent relative to previous years or from previous quarters, since it's measured on an annual or quarterly basis. Gross domestic product can show economic growth, decline, or recession, and it can be determined using three different approaches: expenditure, production, and income. So the first of these approaches, expenditure. This measures the total sum of all products used in developing a finished product or a sale. The production method is the exact opposite, actually, of the expenditure approach. This estimates the total value of economic input and gets rid of the intermediate goods costs that are consumed in the process. So when expenditure takes all the products used, production gets rid of the intermediate goods cost. And then finally, income is somewhere in between expenditure and production. Income totals the domestic incomes earned at all levels. And with the income approach, there are two different names instead of gross domestic product that gross domestic product can be called by. We have gross domestic income, GDI, or GNI, which is gross national income. Next, we move on to standard of living. Standard of living is defined as the degree of wealth and material comfort available to a person or to the person's community. One fact about standard of living that I found really surprising was that 40% of Americans make less than $20,000 before taxes, and even above that, 65% make less than $40,000 before taxes. Another interesting fact that will really shock you is that the 6 heirs, that's only 6 individual people to the Walmart founder Walton, have as much wealth as the bottom 1/3 of Americans combined. That's a lot of people, and that's not very many people that are the 6 heirs. So that's kind of a bad balance, and you can tell that the 6 heirs have a pretty high standard of living compared to that bottom 1/3 of Americans. Another fact is that the number of Americans on food stamps grew from 17 million in 2000 to now up to 47+ million today, and it's probably still growing even more. Based off of that, 18% of all food stamp dollars are spent at Walmart. So the people that have all these food stamps, the 47+ million in America, is probably still growing, and the 18% is probably getting higher as well. Next, productivity. Productivity is defined, or it refers to the relationship between the production of goods and services, which is the output, and the resources needed to produce them, which is the input. One can find the productivity using this equation. Productivity equals the amount of input divided by the amount of input. And the goal of productivity is to produce more goods and services by using fewer hours and other inputs. A correlation that there is that a high level of productivity correlates with healthy gross domestic product growth. So comparing two of the three topics that I'm talking about, as one goes up, the other one goes up. And finally, productivity does not measure quality. Here are just a few tips that you can use in your own personal life and in the future, hopefully, to be more productive. Of the 8 tips that are listed here to help you be more productive, I personally responded to these 3. The first one, just starting a task makes it much easier to finish it. An example of this, especially being in college, is that when you write a paper, a lot of times you start it either a day before or maybe 2 days before. I know it's easier for me if I start it the day that it's assigned or the day that you know most of the information and you can have your ideas flow and make sure you know what you're exactly writing down. The second one that I responded to the most was this 4th one here, that small and mindless tasks can trick your brain into thinking it has accomplished something worthwhile. So everyone knows about social media, and every time that we have homework to do, there's always something that just kind of takes our attention away, and there's Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, everything. So that's always one that's stuck in my head. So when I do my next assignments, I'll think about trying to be more productive and maybe putting those aside and working on the assignment, giving all my focus, and hoping to get a better result. A final way and tip of being more productive is to write a realistic to-do list and a set of goals, if you will, that will keep your focus and keep your productivity high. As well, I also like the one at the bottom because everyone knows that practice does make perfect. So when you're doing an assignment, if you practice it, you keep working hard and focusing with it, you'll be more productive in your future. Now a little quiz. True or false? Gross domestic product can be calculated on an annual or a quarterly basis.
That's true.
That is true, correct. Number 2, what are the 3 approaches to determining gross domestic product?
Was it expenditure, production, and income?
Correct, yep. And the last one, name one tip or piece of advice that would help someone with better productivity.
Make a realistic to-do list.
Very good. Just a little summary of what I've talked about today. Gross domestic product can be calculated using the formula gross domestic product equals C plus G plus I plus NX. As well, it's commonly used as an indicator of economic health for the country as well as the country's standard of living overall. Standard of living is the degree of wealth and material comfort that's available to a person or a community. As well, productivity is the key to long-term prosperity. And then a final tip for better productivity is writing realistic goals and a to-do list to make sure that you keep your focus. These are my sources, and I want to thank you, and hopefully that you'll be more productive in your future and you'll strive to have a high standard of living for the rest of your life. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.